When a Hollywood star walks into a courtroom or sits down for a sworn deposition, the rules of fame and power change overnight, because the camera lights are replaced with the unforgiving weight of truth, and every carefully crafted image collides with the reality of legal questioning. And that is exactly what has happened with Blake Lively, whose unredacted deposition has exploded into the public eye, creating shockwaves across Hollywood and beyond. This is not the polished actress on a red carpet or the beloved figure in glossy magazine spreads. This is the unfiltered Blake, Lively under oath. Her words raw, her tone recorded, and her credibility tested line by line, and the reactions from lawyers and experts are unanimous. This is bad for her because the transcript exposes contradictions, hesitations, and gaps that no publicist can erase, and no Instagram post can distract from. It is the kind of turning point that legal analysts describe as irreversible. Once your sworn words are unsealed, they belong not to you, but to the world, and the world is reacting with intensity. Commentators are calling it the unraveling of her carefully protected image, while insiders whisper about the damage this will do to her professional relationships and reputation, and the public is devouring every leaked line, every screenshot, every viral clip, dissecting what it means for her future. What makes this even more dramatic is that Blake has long been seen as untouchable, one of the few stars who managed to rise above scandal and maintain control of her narrative. But in this deposition, that control slipped, and now the question is whether she can recover, or whether this will mark the beginning of a new chapter, one defined not by glamour, but by doubt. Blake Lively unredacted deposition has now become the most talked about turning point in this ongoing legal drama, and people inside Hollywood, as well as legal experts following the case, are saying this is bad for her. Because what came out in these pages is something that can no longer be hidden behind redacted black bars or sealed filings. This is her own voice, her own words under oath, and that matters more than any carefully curated PR statement or magazine cover. Because when you are speaking in a deposition, you are not speaking as a celebrity with a crafted image. You are speaking as a witness with consequences attached to every phrase. And that is what people are reacting to. The lawyers who have reviewed these transcripts are noting that she gave answers that reveal contradictions, gaps, and moments of uncertainty that could open the door to challenges in court proceedings, and even more damaging in the court of public opinion, because the way she presented herself here does not match the image she has built over the years as someone in control, confident, and untouchable. And this dissonance is what makes the situation feel like a genuine crisis for her reputation and standing in. Hollywood industry insiders are whispering that these pages will follow her for years, because even if legally some portions may not be directly used as evidence in the final case, they already serve as a narrative weapon that her opponents and critics will seize upon to question her motives, her credibility, and her influence. People are saying that this is what happens when you overextend and believe your own power can shield you forever. But the law is a different stage, and when the spotlight turns into a sworn deposition, the mask can slip one answer at a time, and that is what the lawyers who reacted publicly were stressing. They highlighted how a single hesitant phrase or a vague recollection can be dissected to show unreliability, or even evasiveness. And once that perception takes hold, it is very hard to shake off, because audiences, especially in an era of social media and instant commentary, will latch on to the most dramatic lines without context and amplify them into viral talking points. Already, clips of lawyers explaining the significance of her words are circulating widely, with captions that emphasize the severity of the damage being done to her image. One lawyer said bluntly that these answers show she was not fully prepared, and that is the cardinal sin in high-stakes litigation, where preparation is everything. The fact that she appeared unsteady in places suggests her team underestimated how tough the questioning would be, or perhaps that there are truths she cannot fully control by rehearsing narratives. Whatever the reason, it creates a sense of vulnerability that has rarely been attached to her name in public conversation before. The fallout from this is rippling outward into conversations among producers, networks, and brands who have aligned themselves with her. Because in Hollywood, perception is currency, and even if you win a legal battle, if you lose the perception war, you lose opportunities and relationships. The industry is filled with examples where one damaging transcript or leaked email or offhand comment in a deposition reshaped careers. And this might be one of those moments where the unredacted version of events, not the carefully managed summaries, is what defines the next chapter for her in ways she cannot manage through a stylist or a social media team. Already, commentators are pointing out specific lines where she gave inconsistent timelines or could not recall details that were central to her own claims. And these moments are now being spliced into narratives that frame her as unreliable or even manipulative, which might not be the truth in full, but perception often becomes more important than reality in these kinds of sagas. One lawyer reacting to the unredacted deposition explained that while contradictions do not automatically mean dishonesty, they do raise enough questions to cast doubt. And in legal terms, doubt is a powerful tool for the other side to exploit, because it allows them to suggest that her version of events cannot be trusted in full, and that is enough to weaken her standing in court, while also eroding the confidence of allies and supporters who may not want to attach themselves to someone seen as unstable in testimony. Hollywood thrives on stability, on predictability, and on trust. And when a star appears to falter under sworn questioning, it raises questions about whether they can be relied upon in business settings or in partnerships. And that is why executives are watching this closely, because what happens in a deposition does not stay in a deposition when it leaks or becomes public. It becomes part of the celebrity's legacy, for better or worse. And in this case, the overwhelming consensus among lawyers and commentators is that this is worse for her, and it will take extraordinary effort to repair the narrative, if repair is even possible. Because once the public sees words on the page, unfiltered and unredacted, those words stick more firmly than a scripted interview or staged event can ever hope to counterbalance. Already think pieces are being drafted about the lessons of this moment, not just for her, but for other celebrities who might assume that legal processes can be hidden behind confidentiality agreements. The truth is that once something enters the legal record, the risk of exposure always exists. And once exposed, the consequences cannot be rolled back. And that is what makes this such a dramatic turning point, and why the lawyers reacting to it are unanimous in their view that this is bad for her, not just today, but in the long run, because credibility once lost is nearly impossible to rebuild. And this is the thread that is now dominating coverage, not whether she is right or wrong in the bigger claims, but whether she can be trusted as a narrator of her own story. And that is a devastating place for any public figure to find themselves in. The unredacted deposition of Blake Lively is now being treated like a roadmap into the heart of this legal battle, and the lawyers who have gone through the details are emphasizing that while some answers may seem ordinary when you look at them, in isolation, the real damage comes when you view the entire transcript as a narrative, because a deposition is not just a series of questions and answers, it is a performance under pressure. And when that performance shows cracks, those cracks are magnified by every reader, every analyst, and every commentator who wants to draw a conclusion. And the conclusion right now is that this is not good for her. One lawyer described it as the unraveling of a carefully stitched fabric, where each loose thread pulls at the integrity of the whole image. What makes this more difficult for her is that she has long been regarded as a celebrity who knows how to maintain control of her brand and her relationships, but in this setting, she could not rely on charm or stylistic choices. She had to rely on facts, memory, and clarity. And those elements did not always come across strongly. In the unredacted transcript, lawyers pointed out multiple moments where she said she did not recall specific details or could not provide a precise timeline. And while those answers are common in depositions, they become ammunition in the hands of an opponent, because they allow the suggestion that either she was avoiding details or that she lacked the reliability necessary for her claims to stand unchallenged. Another lawyer explained that the very structure of deposition questioning is designed to test credibility by revisiting the same topics in slightly different ways, and when answers do not align, it creates openings for arguments about inconsistency. And here the unredacted version shows that she fell into those traps more than once, which is why the reaction has been so sharp. The lawyers analyzing this deposition are not only highlighting the answers, but also the tone, the hesitations, the pauses, the moments where her words trailed off and needed to be re-clarified by the questioning attorney, because all of those elements suggest pressure and discomfort. And when a high-profile witness appears uncomfortable, it often signals vulnerability that can be used in courtroom strategy. The public, meanwhile, is processing the unredacted deposition, less through a legal lens, and more through the lens of celebrity image and narrative people. Online are saying that this shows her real self, stripped away from the polished interviews and glamorous premieres. This is the unfiltered version, and that unfiltered version does not match the public image she has projected for years. And in an era where authenticity is prized above almost everything else, that mismatch is devastating. Commentators are calling it a moment of authenticity, but not the kind she wanted, because instead of seeming genuine, she comes across as uncertain, defensive, and at times contradictory, which are qualities that damage trust rather than build it. Some lawyers reacting to the transcript suggested that the damage might extend even further into potential settlement negotiations, because when a deposition reveals weaknesses, it shifts the balance of power between parties. Suddenly, the other side may feel emboldened to push harder for concessions, knowing that the witness at the center of the case is not as strong as they had presented themselves to be. And in legal battles, perception of strength often shapes the trajectory of outcomes. Another angle being discussed widely is how this deposition will affect her professional life outside the courtroom. Hollywood is a place where business decisions are influenced by the smallest details of perception, and executives who read the headlines about her unredacted deposition will inevitably wonder whether they want to align themselves with someone whose credibility is being publicly questioned. This is especially relevant for projects that rely heavily on audience trust and emotional investment, because when the lead actor is perceived as unreliable in real life, that perception bleeds into how audiences engage with their characters. Studios and producers may worry that casting her will bring unwanted baggage into their productions, and already there are whispers of hesitation from brands that once considered her a reliable ambassador for campaigns. This is the ripple effect of legal exposure. Once a damaging narrative takes root, it spreads into corners of a career that seem unrelated but are connected by the web of perception. Lawyers reacting to this have been careful to note that while depositions are not trials, and while contradictions do not prove dishonesty, they do matter in ways that extend beyond the strict legal framework, because perception shapes negotiations, strategies, and reputations. And in the entertainment industry, reputation is everything. Another lawyer said that the most striking thing about the unredacted deposition was not any single answer, but the overall impression it left, and that impression was of someone cornered trying to hold on to a narrative that was slipping away with every clarifying question. And that is why they called it bad for her, because impressions are what juries remember. Impressions are what executives remember, and impressions are what the public remembers, even if the technical details fade away. This is the reality of a high-profile deposition. Once the unredacted words circulate, they take on a life of their own, separate from the official proceedings, and become part of the permanent cultural record. This is not something that can be managed through PR alone, because the raw words exist on paper and no spin can erase them. What makes this even more dangerous for her is that the narrative is being shaped not by her team, but by outside lawyers, commentators, and analysts who are interpreting the deposition in ways that highlight weaknesses and uncertainties. And once those interpretations dominate the conversation, it becomes nearly impossible for her to reclaim control. Some are even saying that the unredacted deposition is effectively the first draft of history in this case, and that her opponents will cite it repeatedly to question her reliability and undermine her credibility at every stage. Going forward, the lesson here, as lawyers explained, is that depositions are not just legal obligations. They are battles in themselves, and losing that battle can set the tone for the entire case and for the public discourse surrounding it. In that sense, this unredacted deposition may have already determined the outcome of her reputation battle even before the legal battle reaches its conclusion. The unredacted deposition of Blake Lively continues to echo across Hollywood and legal circles, with experts dissecting every answer, every hesitation, and every contradiction, as if they are puzzle pieces that reveal the larger truth about her credibility and control within this case. What is striking is how lawyers reacting to the transcript are framing the issue less as a matter of winning or losing a specific lawsuit, and more as a matter of long-term damage to reputation and influence, because in law, especially at this level, the outcome is rarely just about the verdict. It is about the leverage it provides and the perception it creates. And right now, the perception being cemented is that her credibility has suffered a serious blow. One attorney who has worked on numerous high-profile cases noted that when inconsistencies are exposed in a deposition, they not only weaken the witness, but they embolden the other side to become more aggressive because they see an opening to push harder, either in motions, in negotiations, or in the public narrative, and that dynamic can change the entire trajectory of litigation. Another point being made repeatedly by commentators is that this deposition undermines her carefully cultivated brand as someone polished and in command, because here in the raw transcripts she comes across as hesitant, uncertain, and at times even cornered, which is a far cry from the confident public persona that has defined her career for over a decade. That gap between image and reality is being seized upon by media outlets that thrive on pointing out hypocrisy or weakness in celebrities, and the headlines already reflect that framing with phrases like cracks in the facade and the unraveling of her narrative. This is why lawyers stress that depositions are not just procedural steps, but pivotal events that can reshape entire cases and careers. Because what is said under oath becomes part of the permanent record and cannot be undone by a press release or a carefully staged photo opportunity. Hollywood insiders are reportedly shaken by the unredacted transcript because it shows how vulnerable even the most seemingly untouchable star can become once they are placed under the eye. Strict rules of legal questioning, and for an industry that thrives on control and image, this is a stark reminder that the courtroom is a different arena where power is measured not by fame, but by consistency and clarity in testimony. Another lawyer, reacting to the deposition, explained that the damaging part was not any explosive revelation, but rather the accumulation of small gaps, vague answers, and contradictions. Because those small cracks, when added together, form a pattern that is difficult to ignore, and that pattern is what the opposing side will emphasize in building their case. Legal analysts are also pointing out that because this deposition is unredacted, it strips away the protective layers that celebrities often rely on in legal proceedings. Usually redactions and confidentiality agreements shield reputations from unnecessary harm. But in this case, the removal of those protections means her words are exposed in full context, and that full exposure is what makes the fallout so damaging. One commentator compared it to opening a diary to the world. Except that in this case, the diary is not a voluntary confession, but a forced testimony under oath. And that difference matters because it makes the content seem even more authentic and therefore more persuasive to the public. The perception of authenticity is powerful, even if the content is not damning in a technical legal sense, because the public tends to view sworn testimony as the ultimate truth regardless of how it might be challenged or contextualized later. And once that perception takes hold, it becomes very difficult to shift. Social media reaction to the deposition has been intense, with users posting screenshots of specific answers and pairing them with captions that highlight her uncertainty or contradictions. And these snippets are going viral faster than any nuanced legal analysis could ever hope to travel. The result is that the public narrative is being shaped by the most dramatic lines, not the full context, which further amplifies the damage. For her, lawyers reacting to this phenomenon have said that once the unredacted transcript entered public view, it was always going to be weaponized in this way. Because that is how modern media works. It thrives on extracting the most sensational parts and leaving behind the nuance. But even knowing that the scale of the damage seems greater than many anticipated because of how central credibility is to her overall image beyond the immediate legal consequences, this deposition also raises questions about her future ability to maintain alliances in Hollywood, because credibility is not only a legal asset, it is also a social one. And when people begin to doubt your word, they begin to distance themselves professionally and personally. This is why commentators are saying that the deposition may have already cost her more than she realizes, because while she may still fight the legal case in court, she may find herself fighting a different battle in Hollywood where people prefer to align with those who are seen as stable, trustworthy, and resilient. The phrase "this is bad for her" has become a shorthand among lawyers and media analysts, not just for the content of the deposition, but for the cascading consequences it will unleash, because credibility, once questioned, rarely returns to its original strength. Another lawyer put it bluntly when they said that what was lost here is not just consistency, but the perception of control. And once people see that you are not fully in control, they will treat you differently. That is the harsh reality of both law and celebrity culture. And it is why this unredacted deposition may be remembered as the turning point where the balance of power shifted decisively against her. At the end of the day, Blake Lively's unredacted deposition has done something no scripted role or glossy magazine cover could ever do. It has exposed her to the kind of scrutiny that strips away the illusion of control and lays bare the reality of a celebrity navigating the unforgiving world of sworn testimony. Once those words left her lips and became part of the official record, they stopped being hers to manage or edit. They became the property of the legal system and now of the public. And the public is reacting in ways that suggest her carefully built image may never fully recover. Lawyers who have reviewed the testimony keep repeating the same phrase, "This is bad for her," because credibility once weakened cannot easily be rebuilt. And in an industry that runs on trust, on perception, and on narrative, that loss of credibility is devastating. The court of law may eventually decide the narrow legal issues, but the court of public opinion has already moved, and in that court the damage is lasting. Hollywood has always been a place where stories matter more than truth, and where perception shapes opportunity. But when the story that begins to dominate is one of contradictions, hesitation, and vulnerability, it creates a shadow that lingers over every future project, every partnership, every negotiation. This is why the unredacted deposition is being described not just as a setback, but as a turning point, because it is the moment where the balance of power shifted, where the mask slipped, and where the narrative changed forever. And for Blake Lively, that change may prove harder to overcome than any courtroom battle. Because while a judge may one day close this case, the world will never forget the words that were spoken under oath.